So we can start again.
There we go.
Okay, so we'll convene at 6:03. We have a quorum with Ben Shaken and I. Alfred Tony said he is held up at work, but hopes to join us in half hour or so. Do we have any, do we have anyone up from the public to comment? I know, Charmaine, you said no. Okay, so let's go. Any staff reports?
No.
Okay. And then we have approval of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
So I'm gonna, I was not at the last meeting, but I think, well, from what I've seen, I agree. I don't want to, I guess we could hold, Al was at the last meeting, but let's hold this off, the approval, since I was not there, until
Okay.
we can do it. If Al, when Al signs on at near the end, we can move the approval for minutes then.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So
All right. Oh, go ahead. Any old business before we get to the new? Okay. And then new business, go ahead. The first one is the extension of auditor agreement for this fiscal year. Go ahead, Charmaine.
correct. So as you all are aware, Bloom Shapiro had a multi-year contract with the town of Mansfield, which was then taken over by CLA when CLA and Bloom Shapiro merged. So our auditor's contract or agreement comes to an end at when they complete the fiscal year 2021 audit. I am bringing before the Finance Committee this request or notice. When I read the purchase policy, I'm supposed to notice the Finance Committee on behalf of any other contracts that are in place. But since this is my contract, my agreement, I really would prefer that you all are privy to what's going on and that you agree by way of a vote to extend this contract. And so fundamentally, like I said, the agreement ends at the end of fiscal year 2021's audit review, which is in progress now. There's a lot going on at the town. And so I'm asking for an extension for a number of reasons. First is knowledge base. Simply put, should the RFP lead us to an alternative auditor, that would need to be, there would need to be an onboarding process, okay? The onboarding process is time consuming and labor intensive for the finance department, as well as for the audit firm. And again, not that we're not willing or interested in getting, through an onboarding process for the best candidate. Now is a very difficult time for us to go through that for a number of reasons. So we would have to be able to teach the new firm how to use two different systems. We are still straddling two different financial management systems. As I shared it might've been the October or November Finance Committee meeting, we're in the process of converting or configuring the Munis system to work with our HR and payroll pieces for 6 different agencies. And as you all are aware, the town has a number of different bargaining units that have a number of different nuances for each of the respective bargaining units. So does the 2 boards of ed as well. So every agency is different in some capacity or another, and we absolutely need to get this right. So there's a lot of heavy lifting that is going on with making sure that ERP part, that part of the ERP transition is going well, on top of just doing business as usual. So to add the additional burden of onboarding for a new audit firm would be a fair amount of stress for the finance department at this time. Plus the fact that CLA actually knows the old system, which is very, they have a limited audience, let's put it that way. So the firm that we use has a very limited client list. So there are very few municipalities and or auditors who are familiar with admins. So they would have to learn that system, Plus they would hopefully come in knowing and understanding Munis, which is sort of like the table stakes for a lot of municipalities, Munis or a Munis light type of firm. So that in and of itself is going to take time away from finance department. We have a ton of projects that are going on as well. Again, the ERP transition for payroll and HR is not due to cut over until much later in the year. We're going to be smack up against them doing an audit while we're trying to do a cutover. And it's just trying to split the atom so many different ways is a challenge. So that's why we're looking to extend the contract for one more year. CLA has provided their quotes. Their quotes literally are what we just paid. So they didn't even increase their rate. It is consistent with our last payment structure that we had in the contract, and all they're looking to do is just extend it one more year.
So that makes sense. So I mean, when we do it, because we need to do this periodically. When do you recommend we put out the request for next year?
If all things fall into place, crossing fingers, toes, and eyes, if all things fall into place as they should, my expectation is that I would be able to do this in December, to do an RFP, to go through the vetting process in January, which would be post the audit of 21-22, and determine who we have. So in the event that we find somebody who is, heads and shoulders above CLA, then we would have the time to do the onboarding with a more veteran staff. I'm not sure if you're aware, I have a new finance manager who just started in July, a new staff accountant who just started in October. We have our payroll administrator who has recently resigned. She was out on leave for some time, just came back at the beginning of the month, and really was feeling like it wasn't good for her. She, with all the other things that are happening in her life. And so she's blessing us with, working with the finance manager to get our payroll processed, this pay cycle, and being sort of a sounding board for questions after the fact. But there's a lot of new faces who I feel I want them to feel empowered and prepared to do what they need to do.
Okay. Ben, your questions or comments?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with the extension. I'm just curious if I know we bid these services every so often, and that's considered in addition to our sort of normal procurement process for stuff. With auditing firms in particular, some people at least view it as a good thing to switch the firm, cost and other bid proposals notwithstanding. So I'm just curious if when the last time is that we switched firms.
I want to say, without off the top of my head, based off of my reviewing agreements and talking to Sherry Trahan, I want to say it might have been 8 years ago.
Okay, so there was a bid, we hired Bloom Shapiro, we did one RFP, rehired them, and now we're extending the second term of their contract for a year, or you're asking us to, okay.
Right.
I don't see an issue with doing that at all.
Tony?
My recollection is, and I may be wrong, is that this was a contract for a period of 3 years, which could be extended for up to 2 years at the expiration.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be the first of the 2 years.
No, this would be the beyond those 2 years.
Beyond those 2 years.
Right.
So this would really require an act of the council to extend, wouldn't it?
Well, when I reviewed the purchase policy, it spikes out professional services, legal services, and actuarial services and things like that outside of the town attorney. And it simply stipulates that I need to bring it before the finance committee to inform the finance committee of what the circumstances are.
Yeah, and I think just to, I don't have it in front of me either, but I think the key word is to bring it before. It's not an approval of the finance committee. It's to just make sure you're disclosing it to the finance committee.
Well, I have have no problem with it either.
And again, like I said, even though I want to bring it before you as part of the purchase policy, but I also wanted to make sure that you all weighed in, because it is an extension off of an extension. So, I just want us to be, as transparent as possible. So, okay, so I'm good if there are no other questions.
Only other, you were mentioning, how, I mean, they're what in there, we keep calling it Bloom Superior, but they merged, what, a year ago, year and a half
Yeah,
ago?
literally this time last year.
And I assume, and we've talked about this a little over time, it hasn't resulted in any, problems with performance and accountability?
With their performance and accountability?
Yeah.
No, they have a different process. They do. So it's more engaged process. So there's even more review. I just naturally assumed at first blush that it was due to the federal funds, but there's that. But then there's also the CLA has its different review processes as well that's in place.
Okay.
So.
I don't know if we need to vote, but I think, but you certainly have the sentiment, which is the three council members on, including Ben and I and the committee, are fine with it. So, all right, great. Thank you, Shameen. Budget and salary transfers, which are in the attachment packet for this meeting.
So I sent that in advance. Because it's nothing it's nothing new, and B, because I know we have some guests, and I didn't know if there was anything in particular that struck your fancy, or if you want me to go through line by line, whichever is your preference.
I don't have a preference. What's Ben? Do you?
In general,
No.
okay.
I mean, I don't think we need to go line by line, but if, I know however you want to, because we can see it right here. There's no need, but if there's anything in particular you want to talk about or no. So
there was a lot of, I say this all the time, a lot of what we call ticking and tying. The original, when the town manager presented the budget to town council last year, the built-in increase was 2%. We were kind of flying blind because we didn't have specific bargaining unit agreements even being negotiated at that time. However, they were going to be expiring. So therefore, the maneuvering needed to take place to accommodate 2.75%. And the line by line in the worksheet shows all the comings and goings, the original appropriations, what we estimated, and then the increase and decrease, and what the final numbers are in the final column to the right. So we fulfilled on being able to make all those moves. A lot of the savings was due to folks getting hired later in the year than what we had expected, or people being hired at a lower rate from those who ultimately decided to retire, and so on and so forth. So we're left with a contingency for this fiscal year, $54,770. So that's the level of wiggle room, Ryan, we have to work with for the balance of this year. But we do have contingency.
okay.
So.
Any comments or questions? I had one question, but it's Ben or Tony.
No.
Okay. I think I'm having some camera speed problems with it. For some reason, I think it's at my end, even though we should have a good connection. Anyway, Shaman, you had mentioned when you and I talked briefly about this earlier, this is Mansfield's way of doing this is unusual. Well, obviously, we're not going to make any decisions today. Would you, is there something you think we should move to a more common system in terms of salary transfers?
So I get what Peter is referring to is from the land from which I come from. We don't do it annually. we do it more often. And I will be honest, it does work the nerves of respecting sitting board and council members, because it's, you know, constantly being brought before the respective sitting body for approval. We do it once a year. It generally, from what I've been hearing from staff and from my predecessors, it's not that big of a deal because there's usually not that much movement. But, you know, I show up during a pandemic, there's a lot of movement. People are coming and going, and people are working more hours, some are, you know, because they have to due to the overtime, and things have to be shifted about substantially as a result of the climate that we're in. So this probably will not be a big deal going forward when we're out of this sort of state of flux. But again, like I said, there's more than one way to, you know, to split a banana. There is. So we do it annually. Other folks do it quarterly, and then there's just some granular folks who do it monthly. So not making any recommendations at this point on one way or the other.
Well,
So.
but that's fine. That's what I wanted to, you know, just to tee it up if we want to talk about it later. All right. Anything else on this topic?
Just a motion to recommend their
Thank you.
approval to the town council from
Okay,
me.
go ahead, Ben.
That's the motion. I move to recommend their approval.
Yep, I second, and we have a unanimous vote to approve.
Thank you very much. So we'll postpone the minutes approval. And at this point, I'd like to, Peter, take the opportunity to introduce Adam.
Yep. Great.
Jeff?
Hi, Adam.
So, and I can share the screen, Adam, so that you can do the presentation. Thinking you would like control of your own presentation.
Sure. Yeah. If I can, let's see, am I allowed to share? Yeah, I'm
Not yet.
disabled from sharing.
Oops, trying to get to it. There we go. Multiple participants. Okay. You want to give it a try now?
Sure. Okay. Yep, it's gonna work. Okay.
So Adam Teff is our consultant, and I thought, yes, Alan is on. Oh, and here is, and Bill as well, Bill Treach. So this is clearly within facilities wheelwell, but because of the financial implications, they are leveraging the finance committee for this opportunity to present the information around solar projects in the town of Mansfield. So I'm assuming Alan and Bill will engage when necessary. Take it away, Adam.
Yeah. Thanks, Charmaine. I appreciate it. Everybody, really nice to meet everybody virtually. I just want to give you a little bit of background quickly about Titan and who I am, and then we can talk about the process that we followed for this RFP, and then talk specifically about the projects and what that means in terms of dollars and cents for Mansfield. So Titan Energy, we've been working with the town of Mansfield now since 2013. We've assisted with a whole range of different energy related issues, RFPs, et cetera. You know, we're founded 20 years ago in Hartford, so we're a Connecticut based company, really a full service energy management company, helping our clients address every aspect of where their energy comes from, how they use it, and how sustainable our clients can be, down to EV charging stations and data management. So really kind of the full spectrum of energy services. We cover those all in-house. We're also the proud procurement partner for CCM. So we do a lot of work for municipalities in Connecticut, again, related to all things energy. I manage Titan Gen, the division of Titan responsible for renewable energy projects and running RFPs specifically for municipalities. So the process that we follow is, you know, tried and true. It really all comes down to evaluating each site, evaluating utility data, making sure that we have a thorough understanding of how Mansfield is using energy, what that energy costs. Thankfully, since we've been partners for so long, I kind of know a lot of this stuff like the back of my hand already. But we really, you know, we follow through the process of drafting the RFP, hosting the site visit with the vendors, analyzing the incoming proposals from those vendors, working with the folks in facilities to make sure that everything is feasible and a good fit for the town, moving through to contract review to project implementation, and then a period afterward of measurement and verification to make sure that you're getting what you thought you were going to get out of the process. So it's really start to finish. We help navigate you through the solar procurement process, which today is, I think, in some ways more important than ever because the programs have changed from where they've been over the last 9 years, and now we're in this new environment where the rules are different. It's been, I think, a net gain for municipalities, as I'll show you, because the project that I want to review with you today, frankly, wouldn't have been possible anytime over the last 5 or 6 years. So it's an exciting time, and I think we're well positioned to get a spot in the new program. So we looked at a handful of different projects. Again, the goal was to cast a wide net to see, where are there opportunities in Mansfield to introduce more sustainable renewable energy projects like rooftop solar or other forms of solar. And, my goal is always to try to find the sweet spot between the projects that have the least amount of impact on you from an operational perspective and are feasible, low cost to build, yield good results financially in terms of savings or release revenue, and also help you meet your sustainability goals. So the projects that we focused on for this RFP ended up being the landfill and also a possible project at the town hall for covered parking. And I actually have some new data that I can share once I get through this master presentation, but some of that relates back to the annual savings or the lease revenue associated with the projects if the town of Mansfield had some interest in being a co-investor on the project, so to speak. But for purposes of the conversation now, these projects would be completely owned, operated, and maintained by the selected vendor. So there's zero capital investment required from the town. It is purely, financial upside and another big step towards helping the town meet its pretty aggressive renewable goals. And there are two options for the landfill. There is today, what we're able to do is offer either utility bill credits, so credits that are created through the energy that's produced by the array and then distributed across various Eversource accounts in town. So basically you're just receiving financial credits, not energy, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. But that would be one way to monetize this project, to lower the Eversource bills in town. And the way we do that is through a concept called virtual net metering. That term might be familiar, might not be familiar. I'd like to walk you through just sort of graphically what that means, but it's virtual net metering, verbally anyway. Virtual net metering is a way for municipalities to build large-scale solar arrays that aren't necessarily physically connected to any particular building. So, for instance, I know that the town is going to be installing rooftop solar at the middle school fairly soon. That is a specific kind of solar called behind the meter. So what that means is the solar is on the roof, it's physically connected to the building. Energy from the array goes back into the building for use in real time. Whatever can't be used in real time is netted out over time through a mechanism called net metering, which is a little too similar sounding to virtual net metering, but it's something different. Long and short of it is that for those projects, the financial benefit you get is avoided Eversource costs. So you don't have to purchase the energy that you've produced from Eversource. And that's really the way that most people are familiar with solar and the way that they conceive of it. But what virtual net metering allows you to do is still derive the same degree of financial benefits, but done differently. The energy from the array goes directly back into the power grid. So Eversource is responsible for receiving that power and metering it. What Eversource is then responsible for doing is assigning credits on your Eversource bill that relate back to the energy volumes that were produced from the array. And I think it's probably helpful. I'll move to a slide very shortly that shows how this works kind of graphically. I think I'm personally more of a visual learner, so I think sometimes these images can help explain. But the major difference is with rooftop solar co-located at the building, you're using the energy, you're reducing your Eversource costs through avoided purchases from Eversource. With virtual net metering, it's more of a financial transaction that corresponds directly back to the amount of energy produced by the array, but you're not physically connected to the array. And that allows you to build bigger, which is always a good thing because you can get greater scale and drive your costs down. It allows you to distribute credits to buildings that might not be good candidates for on-site solar, meaning you might have a roof that's 10 or 15 years old that doesn't lend itself to the installation of panels. There might be aesthetic reasons why you don't want to put solar in certain places. There could be any number of reasons, but virtual net metering really helps break down those barriers, which is a good thing. So in that case, you'll see in the solar bid response snapshot, there are two options here. There's the winning bidder in this case is a company called Vergy. They're a Hartford-based solar group. Really great track record, tend to be pretty successful in municipal RFPs. They're offering this project two different ways. One, and this is the way I'll just say a lot of municipalities that I work with, they tend to go the direction of the lease, which eliminates some of the complexities, admittedly, some of the complexities of receiving credits directly on your bills. Instead, they'll just pay the town a flat rate and say, there's no production risk, there's no calculations to do, there's nothing to keep track of. We'll take all that on, we'll sell power back directly to Eversource, and we'll just pay you a lease. Simple enough. So over a 20-year period, lifetime value there is about $1 million. The other option, like I described before, is virtual net metering, where you'll see as we go through these columns, you have your system size, the number of kilowatt hours that are produced in the first year, and then you'll see the solar credit value. So for every kilowatt hour the array creates, in this case, you'd get a 15-cent credit. So kilowatt hours times 0.15, slice and dice it for the accounts that it goes to, and that's what you receive on your bill. Correspondingly, because the developer has to get paid by somebody, the town would then pay for each credit, but at a discount to its value. So the spread between this 15-cent credit you receive and the 12.86 cent payment for each credit yields an annual savings of just about $65,000 a year. And lifetime value associated with this is just a little bit higher than the lease. And I'll show you how the cash flow breaks out over a 20-year period. The major difference here is with virtual net metering, because your credit is based on production, the annual savings drops a little bit every year because you lose production every year from the panels. It's just natural degradation of the system. So your savings over time starts to fall. Whereas with the lease payment, it's fixed no matter what, sunny year, cloudy year, cold year, warm year, whatever. And that's how the value, your two options, how the value would flow back to Mansfield. And in terms of the town hall carport, we did identify that as another opportunity for a project. However, as you'll notice, the annual savings are minimal. And the reason is because small carport projects in Connecticut are really expensive to build. And relative to the cost of power that Mansfield pays, it just doesn't yield a big delta between the value of each kilowatt hour, what you're paying for it, and what we can offset versus what the power purchase agreement price is. So in many ways, I view that project as it's it could be a good sustainability statement and offer the convenience of covered parking for folks who are working at the town hall, but it's not as much of a cost saver or revenue source as the other project. Let me see. I know I just threw a lot at everybody. Why don't I open it up for questions quickly before I proceed, just so I don't get too far ahead of where everybody is understanding wise.
Adam, when we were talking earlier, one of the questions I'm realizing now I'd meant to ask you and didn't was, so I didn't do the exact calculation, but just eyeballing the difference between the lifetime value difference between the lease and the virtual net metering option. It's like a 20%, something like that difference in terms of the lease being, or sorry, the virtual net metering projected lifetime value savings being 20% higher. Is that, to the extent that that's like a ratio, is that like a pretty common ratio? Like, is that where you would expect most proposals to shake out, that your virtual net metering projection is about 20% higher than your lease? Or is that higher or lower than you would normally see in a project?
Yeah, it's pretty common. I mean, a potential, negotiation tactic could be to ask Verigy to try to close that gap a little more. But the reason that gap is there, it's, I think, really just best thought of as like a risk premium. In the case of the lease agreement, the town is assuming zero production risk. So no matter what happens, like you get a really, really cloudy summer, you get a really, really sunny summer, just as a for instance, your production could be a little bit higher than lower than anticipated. Or, any number of things could happen, but the production risk really sits squarely on Verigy in that sense. Yep. So this is generally pretty common. What I see with the trade-off being between a lease and the VNM. The VNM is more of a shared production risk, so there's more. I think any developer is more inclined to share that upside over time with the party that's kind of sharing in that risk with them. But if it came down to a point where we could always request and say to Verigy, like, hey, we noticed there's a 20% gap, give or take, between the two options. Can you help us and close that gap further?
Yeah, and you and I, we can, and we'll probably have a follow-up conversation, talk a little bit more about strategies. Probably best left off a public meeting like this. I just wanted to, I guess, just know if that was in the realm of what you often see, ballpark ratios, and it sounds like it is. So okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing. Anybody else have any other questions they wanted to ask before I move through?
Yeah, I have two. One is around the carport proposal. I'm not in, I think it would look nice and would be a nice statement, but it seems like a pretty expensive project without much benefit to us. I'm wondering if it's one of those, from a construction standpoint, one of those things where there's an economy of scale if we were to expand and try to put carport parking in on all of our municipal parking lots, some of the school lots, et cetera, that we also have, the community center, et cetera, whether there would be a lower construction costs and so better sort of potential savings for us over time, or if it's like other parts of construction where there's really just a per square foot unit cost essentially, and so expanding the scope will just expand the scope without any advantage.
Right. Yep. I understand the question. So two aspects of that question, I think, that popped to mind for me. One is you're kind of hit the nail on the head with the economy of scale you get with carport projects wouldn't come from, hey, let's do 10 small carport projects throughout town. It would be, hey, we could start to get an economy of scale with a big project. So we don't see the kinds of cost reduction that you might hope for if it's just a series of additional small expensive projects. And when I did look, kind of cast a wide net to try to find other carport style projects in town that would make sense, some of the, the barriers I run into is most of the lots, frankly, are fairly small. This was actually the biggest individual carport project that made sense that we could find. I did see at one point, Alan shared with me, it looked like some helioscopes had been done of different parking lots at schools and towns and things like that. And when I evaluated those, most, if not all of them, were just not feasible. There was either shading issues, shadows cast by adjacent buildings and things like that, or they were so small that they would never pencil out. Again, when we were looking at how to bid these projects and which ones to put in the RFP, the goal was to, bring the projects forward that we thought would produce a good financial outcome for the town. And in my view, anyway, from a carport perspective, this was the one I thought, had some substance to it and could yield a decent price. But as you'll note, it's still pretty skimpy on the savings.
Okay. And then my second question is, this has come up when we've talked about doing PPAs in the past. When we have our middle school roof project, the high school solar panels that have been installed already, the PV stuff that we're going to be building in the new elementary school, because they're part of the state construction grant that comes from the school. We don't have a PPA on those. Those are our panels, and so we're paying for we own them, and we're reaping the full benefit. If I'm doing the math right on the back of the envelope right now, which I might not be, it seems like for the landfill project, the developer would be, for every $4 in savings, or for every $5 in savings that we generate, the developer gets 4 and we get 1, under the virtual net metering proposal. And so I guess my question is, that to me means that your lifetime savings, if you own the panels, might be 5 times that amount. So instead of $65,000 a year, $250,000 a year, 300,000 in that range, and instead of 1.2 million over 20 years, that would be 6 or 7 million over 20 years. So I guess my question is, what would the upfront construction cost be for a project like this, given that the landfill is already cleared and already pretty well run over by backhoes and stuff, right now? And is it something that we would be smart to consider making the investment ourselves rather than ceding the sort of investment and profit to a developer?
Yeah, so I mean, you could certainly own this system. There's absolutely no reason on its face why you can't. I would argue owning a 2.4 megawatt system on a landfill is a little different than, a 125 kW project on a roof or something like that, just in terms of the maintenance responsibilities and all the things that are associated with that. But just setting that aside for a sec. This project, from capital cost, so the array itself is probably about 4 million. And then there is an anticipated interconnection cost on this project of about $1 million. So about 5 million. The reason that the interconnection cost is so high for this project is because you're about a mile away from the closest location to pick up your 3-phase power line. So the general rule of thumb in the business is about $1 million a mile if you need to run power from where your array is to where you interconnect to the local 3-phase power line. What I did do is I did ask Vergy if the town wanted to basically co-invest, if you will, in this project and contribute to that interconnection cost amount, what would the economics look like for the town in that case? And it's fairly, it was an improvement for sure. I would still need to, I would want to run like the IRR calculations, or you guys could either way, to see how much sense that made. I just need to kind of button it up a little bit, and then I was going to circulate it back to everybody. But if there was, an appetite to do that, Verigy is open to that. I'm not sure what the reimbursement rate is for the state and that kind of thing for a project like this. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But all told, the project pre-reimbursement sticker price, if you will, is probably about $5 million.
And Ben, just so you know, when Adam gave us his initial walkthrough of all this, I asked because I wasn't sure, obviously, I'm still not sure what the council's interest or appetite would be in doing so, but we've obviously identified a relatively sizable amount of ARPA funds that were previously recommended for another project we may be looking to redirect to something else. And so I did ask Adam to inquire if the town put in $1 million, basically cover the interconnection costs is essentially what it would work out to, as he said, to co-invest in the project, what that would do to the PPA price. And so it sounds like he's buttoning up the numbers, but that was part of the conversation we had.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, I think just in broad strokes, that eats up most of what you would realize over the course of the project in upfront cost anyway. So this seems like a pretty good, the virtual net metering or the lease both seem like pretty good deals for us in terms of risk and where we come out in the end.
Yep, I see Tony's hands up.
Okay.
The benefits and the costs are based on two numbers. One of them is the amount we would get as a credit, and the other is the PPA price. I can't imagine that Eversource will give you a 20-year guarantee for a 15-cent credit, and I can't imagine that you guys would give us a 20-year guarantee that you would come in significantly below that number. What kind of guarantees do we have on money?
So I will assure you, actually, that the way that the new program works, and we have to bid into the program, mind you. So that's another aspect of this conversation that I would like to address with everybody tonight, because it sort of plays into how we go about organizing our this project. But the beauty of the new program is that if you bid in to the program, you lock in your credit value with Eversource. And the other side of that is Verigy locks in this rate as well. So that spread between, again, let's just call it 15 cents and 12.86 never changes. That is fixed for 20 years.
Thank you.
And then, sorry, can I ask just one more? The life
of
of the panels is 20 years. Is the sort of general sense that then after 20 years you engage with a contractor to go through and replace the panels and you do another one of these agreements, or you what happens at the end of the contract?
Yeah, so there are three options, and the useful life of the equipment, the panels themselves, they're warranted for 25. So the expectation is you could get 25 good years. The reason that the contract is for 20 is because that is the incentive term. So when we submit for and are awarded a spot in the program, Eversource is guaranteeing that they will compensate at 15 cents per 20 years. After that, we would be in a period of of time where it's really impossible to know what programs would be in place. If nothing else, though, you have a system here with another good 5 to 10 years left. Even if you're selling power on the wholesale market, the system is long since paid for, and the options in the agreement would be one of three. One, you could either ask Verigy to take the equipment back and restore the site at their cost, so pre-solar. You could do 5-year extension on the agreement, obviously, mutually agreed to terms, or the town could choose to buy the system out at fair market value at that point. My sense of things is it's either going to be the first or the second option in 20 years, not necessarily the third, because if you own the system, eventually you're responsible for decommissioning it, which obviously has a cost. So, I counsel most folks to anticipate either working out an extension because the equipment will still have useful life, or if you're ready to do something entirely different, ask Verigy to take the equipment back and restore the site.
Thank you.
Sure. Unless anybody else has any other questions, I can move on.
Does anyone, okay, go ahead. I know we don't.
Sure. Yeah, so this is just a schematic of what the array would look like, the footprint it would occupy, where the equipment would go. Luckily, it's a really neat and clean site, relatively flat, it's dry. We don't need to do any tree clearing. There's plenty of room for the equipment. The step down transformer. So again, I think sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I'd like to make sure everybody has a chance to see this. And this slide is just a 20-year look at both options, just so you can get a sense of how the money flows. To a large extent, we've kind of covered some of this stuff. But you can see here the credit value and the credit cost; those stay fixed. The only variable is production. And then in the ground lease option, I show production, but it's irrelevant. You collect the flat lease rate either way. And this is the location of the carport. If it ever becomes a project of interest for XYZ reasons. This would actually be done as what's called a long span system, where the steel supports are on the outer edges, and then there's decking and the panels on top. So sometimes when people think about carports, they think of like a T shape, where you have the steel supports kind of running down the middle, and then you have your panels on top sitting at an angle. The reason that this is a long span, so you get your steel supports on the edge, and then you got your roof, is because these parking spaces are kind of on the outer perimeter of this stretch of asphalt. So in order to keep the area, plowable and manageable for everybody, not lose any parking spaces, etc., that's how the system would be constructed if this was something eventually that you wanted to do. And I can show an example picture of a long span parking garage if that's helpful for anybody.
Adam, I know this is not necessarily a project that at the moment there seems to be a lot of compelling interest in pursuing, but just out of curiosity, do you have any sort of rendering or can you give us a sense of what the sort of street level sort of viewscape would be in terms of the height? I'm thinking the direction of the panels, reflectivity, who's going to be blinded by these things, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so the panels would actually tip. So these would be about 13 feet off the ground. And I know this isn't a picture, but they'd be about 13 feet off the ground, angled back towards the town hall. So I don't think there'd be any glare issues from
Okay.
anybody who's over at EO Smith. Let me just pull something up real quick here too, just for the sake of, I got everybody here. This is a larger scale, but it gets the point across, I think, in some ways. So let me just, yeah, this is one that we did in a parking garage. Again, bigger, but it's the same idea where you have your steel supports on the outer edges of the lot, you know, large steel beams going over the center, and then steel supports on the other end too. You get your inverters up there, and it functions as a covered space. That's probably the best picture of a long span that I have right now, but we can work on getting you a rendering of something like if you are like at ground level, you know, what that might look like.
And I mean, I know this is not, we don't have to debate on it. I don't understand why, why do we even need covered parking?
Well, we had bid it out as, you know, one of the candidates that we thought could be of interest to Mansfield, not only for, you know, potential dollar savings, which admittedly there aren't a lot, or if you're trying to meet sustainability goals and are looking to do a project that might add a level of convenience, I guess, for folks at the town hall, have their vehicles shielded from the elements, hot days, snowy days, etc. You know, there may be some non-monetary reasons to consider it. So I figured, you know, let's bid it out and see what we get, because it seemed like the most viable of the parking lots to do a project with some scale to it. But again, you know, as I said, the numbers were not fantastically.
Right, no, I get it. Thank you. Anything else? Because I know we have another presentation.
Oh, sorry, I know I'm probably taking way too long.
Okay.
The only other things that I would just share with everybody quickly is we have a fairly tight timeline, just by virtue of the way that Eversource programs work. We have one chance to submit this project into the program for 2022. And in order to make all that come together, the town of Mansfield and Verigy, or whatever vendor you'd select, would need to have the agreement between the two entities finalized by the end of February, which is certainly not impossible. It's well within the range of time that I think, you know, you have an attorney look at the agreement and everybody puts their best, you know, foot forward in terms of, you know, giving the agreement attention. And it can certainly be done. And the reason that I'm very, very strongly suggesting any clients that I'm working with now to try to get into the program this year is that the rules were only just finalized about 4 months ago. So anybody who isn't like poised and ready to go for 2022 is going to inevitably be on the sidelines until next year. And next year, you're going to have a year's worth of projects all vying for the same number of dollars. And it's just going to be much more difficult to get selected in the program next year than this year. So for anybody who thinks that they want to do this and you know, kind of get the ball rolling on it, my honest to goodness suggestion is if you can get the agreement finalized by last week of February, that will ensure that you can submit and be considered for the program for 2022. And I'll leave you with that, because that's really kind of the most important timing detail at this point from my perspective.
Can I ask energy usage question? I mean, I think the finances of this make sense, and I'd like to pursue it. I know it'll be on our agenda on Monday, so if we need to recommend something officially, then maybe we can. I'm just curious if you can give us a sense from from a net zero perspective, how much power, how much energy in general this would offset in terms of what the town uses every year. So we would be generating 3 million kilowatts. Is that what it is?
Yep.
And
So-
what's our current sort of cumulative electric bill? And then have we taken the next step of converting our fuel costs into kilowatt hours and other equivalencies like that as well?
Yeah, so on a kilowatt hour basis, and I understand what you mean about converting your fuel consumption, your liquid fuel, natural gas to BTUs, and looking at net zero status is like, across the board with, either using like BTUs or some other metric. So if you include EO Smith in that number, then you're like 3.6 million kilowatt hours or 3.7 million kilowatt hours. If you exclude EO Smith, you're right at around 3 million, maybe like 3,000,001, 3,000,002. So this project is the equivalent of almost 95% of the energy consumption in town on your Eversource electric meters. So
And when you add in the PV that is generating on EO Smith and will be generating in the middle school and the elementary school, are we basically
actually,
there if this project is built in terms of our electric consumption at least?
Now you raise a good point about the new elementary school, because I was excluding that because I figured it's net zero already, right?
Mostly,
Or it will be.
as close as we can get. Yeah.
Yeah, as close as you can get. So I've just been treating that like it's off the radar. And I know that you have a 120 kW array at the middle school, so I'm also factoring that into
Got it. Okay.
my thinking as well, and the existing PV at EO Smith. But I know that EO Smith I get is Region 19. It's not Mansfield proper. So.
Okay, any other questions or anything?
Well,
This has been, go ahead, Adam.
no, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, Ryan, go ahead. No, I was gonna, no, go ahead.
It was me. It was Ben. I was going to make a motion if we are at that time, if there's one that we need to make.
I think we are. Go ahead, Ben.
So should Ryan and Charmaine, should I just make a general recommendation motion to the council? I mean, I think.
So Ben,
I'll
there's
defer.
actually no official action needed by finance. It would be great during Monday's discussion, you, Peter, the group can chime in and say, you received this briefing and you're supportive, but there's no actual action needed.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would, if I were to refer right now, I would make a general recommendation. I don't think I've decided between a lease and virtual net meter propositions in terms of what I think makes sense, but that'll be a full council decision on Monday. So sounds like I have that time.
Okay. All right,
Adam?
go ahead.
I was just going to thank Adam for, being
Yes.
prepared to present today, and I will be sharing his presentation as part of the minutes, so you'll have yet
Great.
another piece of resource that you can kind of chew on prior to that meeting if you'd like. And I guess we'll see you next week, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, thanks
Thank
everybody.
you very
Appreciate
much,
the time.
Adam. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Okay. And then we go to,
Park and Rec.
yeah, Jay? Jay,
Evening, everybody.
good evening. Before you start, I just want to say two things. One, first, thank you for your patience on the meeting, and two, congratulations. This is well deserved, and I don't know, with the first committee, town council meeting, officially recognize and acknowledge and thank you for your service, but it's great to have you permanent director. So thank you.
Well, I'm certainly excited to be in this position, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Peter.
So now you can tell us how you're going to fix, about 5 minutes to fix the community center finances, if you could.
Well, sure. I've been on the official job for 7 days, so I
More
got it
than
all
that.
figured out.
All right, go ahead. Thanks, Sid.
Well, Kim Rodney, who's our member service coordinator, is at the center tonight and is handling some things out front. But if she can, she'll be joining us, perhaps to lend some support and information. There she is. Thank you, Kim. But I guess what I wanted to say at the start was a couple of things. One is we are happy to go back and review any parts of the proposal or update that you would like us to do. And secondly, I do want to point out that since it was December that we last met, I believe, I was going back through the packet and getting refreshed with things and noticed that the acting director had overseen something or made a mistake on a calculation. And so I want to correct that for the acting director as director. It is on page 7 of, I don't know if I do have a copy, Charmaine, or should I provide that on? So
you're able to share if you'd like.
Yeah, I can share if I like. Okay, let me just do that a second. Everyone see that there?
I don't see anything yet.
No.
Now we do.
How about now? We good?
Yep.
So I just wanted to quickly point out, again, we can go back over any areas of this that you would like, but page 7, if you bear with me here. I previously had a number down here of this losing 19K in the first year of being a $22,000 gain in the first year. And this included, that was with a 50% discount that, again, these are suggestions, so we may or may not go that way, but really the main thing that did not change is if we gave a 50% discount the first year to entice people to stay on with us, if we were to move in a direction of discontinuing silver sneakers, and that is a big if. But then every year going forward, it would be the 44 estimate gain or larger, unless we were doing something with discounts. So I just wanted to point that out. Having said all that, again, I think my understanding from last time was that we had gone through this update because the committee was looking for a little bit stronger recommendations, was my recollection. And I think on page, I kind of can maybe start with a recap real quickly here. So page 5, under staff recommendations, wanted to point out that, assuming no change in what I understand to be the current philosophy of the Recreation Program Fund, where we're expected to recover, basically all funds outside of the general fund support that we typically receive. So typically around 80% or so. So following basically a business model, we're searching for dollars. What's making us money, what's breaking even, what's losing money. And with that kind of starting point, it's looking at this program and saying, obviously, it's a great benefit to the folks that have this as an insurance benefit. It's tremendous for our seniors, and it's a great option for them. For the Parks and Rec Fund, it's a little bit more of a challenge. We started out as a much smaller number back in 2014. That number has ballooned quite a bit. We have trimmed that back. We'll talk about that in a moment, but basically it's a big enough number now that it seems to be an area that is difficult to keep pace with what we used to see from membership revenues. A big part of that, as you recall, is a conversion from a lot of the state retiree system moving into an option for silver sneakers. So having said that, we also are very sensitive to COVID right now. I mean, as it's no surprise that we have been forced, dealt a difficult hand and in trying to, maintain things here at the center. We think it would be a difficult time to remove a benefit from members that we need every member we can get right now. And so having said that as well, there are folks in our professional world that travel the United States and do consultant work to come up with financial analysis on program fees and membership fees to help stabilize funds. And of course, a lot of that's dependent upon what the town's philosophy is. But that said, those are kind of the three opening things I wanted to maybe emphasize a little bit. We love our seniors. We want to do good by them, but we are faced with some difficult financial challenges.
Thank you. So I just had, well, two questions, I guess. One, there's going to be, at least the assumption is, thousands of state employees retiring by the end of June due to changes in retirement and cost of living benefits. Where that's, how many, maybe the state knows, I hope they do, but we don't. But are you concerned that there's going to be, decent numbers be all through the state, but a decent, perhaps a decent number will be in this area, obviously with the university. Are you considering whether, or have you calculated or even or thought about ways in which the silver sneaker problem may be worsened if more, as more university state employees retire?
Well, so the answer to that is we're always trying to gather information and get ahead of things, and we are concerned. There's a couple of things that are happening, and one is, there are other changes being made to other insurance options too for folks. So it's not just silver sneakers as we know it now, but some states, not in Connecticut yet, some states are starting to offer it more widespread throughout their Medicaid and Medicare programs, is my understanding. And that may cast a larger net for people that might be available for that well beyond just your typical state worker. There's also been a movement as of this past January, and maybe Kim can speak to this a little bit. I think I have a good understanding, but there are Renew Active we haven't talked too much about that, but Renew Active is another insurance option that some folks have to them as a retiree, and the teachers retirement insurance. It's my understanding that as of January 1, moved away from silver sneakers. So silver sneakers have been discontinued, and Renew Active now is replacing that plan. Now Renew Active, we get $20 for one swipe. So $20 a month if you come in one time, whereas right now, silver sneakers is $3 every swipe until you hit your cap at 30. So we haven't quite, it's been very early for us. We'll have maybe Kim speak to this a little bit, but in talking to Kim, we are seeing some people that are having to switch into Renew Active, but our sense is those are the people that are at our cap. They tend to be the folks that are here more. And so potentially we may see it might sound initially, hey, we're going to get $20 versus the $8 and change we usually get, but we might see over time that we might be actually getting less if these people were hitting their caps of silver sneakers. So not to confuse a blur or, but that was, kind of something, when you asked that question, Peter, I wanted to, expand that landscape a little bit about some other things that we're seeing out there.
So yeah, I was curious about Renew Active. I wasn't familiar with the term. So better, I mean, and just tell me if this this generalization is inaccurate, but better than Silver Sneakers, but still insufficient revenue based on a cap, on the $20 cap a month.
Where I think it would work really well for us is the folks that obviously are underneath that cap. That would be an obvious plus for us, right?
Okay.
But that's why in part of our recommendations, we said, if we were to decide to make some changes with Silver Sneakers, that we may want to maintain Renew Active and see what happens on a year-to-year basis. But I will say that there's some other plans out there. There's an Optum plan, which is a commercial plan. It's not a retirement plan. It's Optum Commercial is for non-governmental, workers. As young as 18, you can be eligible for a reduced rate. I only mention that not to muddy the waters, but just to let you know that there are other insurance companies very actively trying to offer their clients this fitness benefit. And so it's something we're very cautious about doing. Renew Active does not have a class requirement. For example, the Silver Sneakers, not only are we losing revenue off of what a typical membership would be, we also have to pay out instructors to teach classes as part of our contract. So
Oh,
Renew
okay.
Active does not currently have that requirement, but they are now, I would say, inquiring with us several times about us considering that, because they're getting that question from their patrons. So it's everything that comes at us, we're very careful about before we make any decisions. But
Jay, when Peter and I, because Peter obviously didn't have the benefit of taking part in the December meeting, so we were reviewing the memo, and he was lobbing some questions my way. And one of the questions that came up, and I couldn't remember if you touched on this in last month's meeting or if it was something you and I maybe talked about when we were talking about just kind of one-on-one, but if overall for us, as of October 2021 anyway, over half, about 55% of our total membership kind of falls in the category of insurance supported membership, whether it's Renew Active or Silver Sneakers. That sounds like a very high percentage. And could you just maybe put that in the context of, like, because I thought you had data at one point, kind of whether it was statewide or national data or some other facilities you kind of self-selected, but just how that slightly more than 50% of our total membership, how that compares to other community centers out there?
sure. So, trying to do the research that we can, we cast, through our national organization, forum and discussions, trying to get feedback for a variety of questions, but one of them was percentage, and also through some, phone calls out to colleagues. And basically, well, I think the average was 10%, and I know I have it in the document here. It was 15% of the membership, 5% of the membership, 4% of the membership, but the average of the folks that I spoke with or was able to get information back through the forum was an average of about 10% of the membership. And the folks that had 10% of the membership with Silver Sneakers, they thought it was great. I will tell you that without getting too sidetracked on that Ridgefield, who has a very similar center to us, and one of our colleagues up in Concord, Mass, that has a similar facility, have reviewed Silver Sneakers as an option and decided not to go that way because of the concern that they might see in a flip in their membership. And I can talk about some other things that are happening nationally, but in terms of your question, yeah, our percentage is around 40% when you make up the resident, non-residents, Silver Sneakers only. When you start to factor in Renew Active, it approaches around 55%. So it's just very different than maybe what some communities are seeing out there.
So when you said Ridgefield decided, did they, I think it was Ridgefield, did they terminate the connection with Silver Sneakers or decide not to engage in it at all?
They decided not to engage at all.
Okay.
That was also true for Concord. One of the challenges in the towns have been finding towns that, we're very fortunate to have a center like this. It's not an easy thing in New England to find out. But anyhow, my point there is, yeah, they both reviewed it and said they did not see the benefit, the upside of that, and they've offered some different options for their seniors, whether that be discounts, off-peak things. So they've tried to tackle that in a different way, but nowhere near that kind of a discount that you might see with a Silver Sneakers, but some modest discounts.
Peter, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Tony.
We're in a labor market where more than half of the jobs are government jobs. And a very large percentage of those are state jobs. So the retirees who get to stay here are more likely than not, I think, to have state benefits of one form or another. So the only other, the neighboring community is Wyndham, and they're going to have the same problem. Do we have any idea how Wyndham is planning to finance its community, soon to be open community center?
I've had a couple of conversations with colleagues down there. Obviously, they're very busy to be opening here. I haven't had anything, like in the last 6 weeks, but my general sense there, it's a little different, different model. My understanding is that they are basically, what they're charging right now is $10 for a resident and 20 for a non-resident to take part in the facilities part of the new community center that they're opening. And then classes after that would be a fee.
Jay, is that per visit?
No, I believe that's a monthly fee.
Okay, so they're competing with the private gymnasiums by putting those kinds of fees in.
I think so, and
they're modeled after their current rates that they were using for the Kramer's building.
So they're intending to fund the operations of the community center very heavily out of general funds.
I would gather so. I did not get I didn't get a real specific answer to that question when I asked it, but they said basically, as Kim said, they're carrying forward the same philosophy that they operate with right now at Kramer School. So I could, certainly dig into that more, but right now, I would assume that's what's happening. That's typically, I don't know to what, what that percentage of contribution is in their overall budget, but I know that it seems like that's what their philosophy is there.
My sense is they're going to be our big competition.
Well, we see a lot of activity, up here from our seniors and of course, other folks too, from the Wyndham and surrounding communities. So, we have them on our radar. Quite honestly, we're happy for Wyndham that, it's nice that they're having that, but at the same time, we have to watch out for, our interest. And it's another competitor on the list. And we've seen that landscape change in the 20 years since we opened, or at least dreamed up the facility. The town, made a decision to go ahead with something. So landscape has changed outside of Wyndham too, but it's one more in the marketplace. And yeah.
Just to be clear, we don't know if they're planning on participating in any of the insurance markets yet.
We don't know that yet. I believe that their senior center has what they call which is an option that we presented here in the packet too. They have a what's called, is it Silver Sneaker Flex, Kim, where it's not a membership to this, but if you have if our Mansfield Senior Center had it, and as Wyndham has right now, my understanding is you can take class, you can do classes only at a senior center, but it's not a membership, of course, at that point. So now if they go into more of a community center, I would imagine that they're going to try to expand that out to a membership to their center, I would think.
Jay, do you have, this is incredibly helpful, so thank you, all of you, because I know thank you, Tim. No, sections A and B, on staff recommendations, section A and B, deliberately so you can't do both of them. Do you have any recommendation yet on whether we should keep silver sneakers or not?
Well, if you were to ask me, do we not keep it right now? I would say now would not be the time. If only because of the COVID situation, not only, but one of the reasons being COVID situation. So I say again, and going back to, if the business model that we seem to be operating under is watch our expenses, deliver the best services we can, but also be financially responsible, then we're forced to really take a hard look at that and understand that that might be a direction that we would recommend that direction. Knowing that there can be some fallout from that. And, there is a risk there. And with Wyndham coming on the landscape, potentially, that's another wrinkle. So to answer your question, I think, it certainly was something that we would push forward, but knowing that it's, with an estimated, $44,000 change, it's not a huge chunk, but when you add it to other things that we're faced with, the rising cost of minimum wages and the cascading effect into other wages and our, full-time employees, benefits, et cetera, it all adds up, right? So that's the concern. And the option would be, are there ways that we try to present some things here? And I'm sure there's more ideas, but, if we didn't have that, what could we do as a town to demonstrate that, might be a different way to lessen a cost for a senior or subsidize a cost, or can we do that with private donations or looking at, the existing fee waiver program, et cetera. So there's a lot of different things in here, but it's a combination of trying to say, okay, if that were to go away, we really need to make sure before that we make that decision that we try to have some things in place for lessening the cost of a membership for a senior.
And can I ask a question?
So go ahead, Ben.
Am I remembering, and we've had a number of these conversations, am I remembering correctly that, like other sort of facility-based insurance reimbursements, there's some pretty hard and fast sort of rules in the Silver Sneaker contract that would prevent us from doing some more out-of-the-box thinking as it relates to other town resources? So examples of like a virtual swipe if you take a hike on a town trail, or offering some classes at the community center and swiping people in there, or I'm sorry, at the senior center and swiping people in there. My recollection is you all looked into that, and there's a you have to walk in the facility sort of requirement for us to count a swipe in the Silver Sneaker program.
Yes and no. So there are definitely some strict guidelines and rules that Silver Sneakers has in place. So no, we can't just do something anywhere and count it as a swipe. Some of the rules, for example, would be that we would have to have like a Silver Sneakers certified instructor at a sponsored location of ours. There's more specific tracking for how we have to record those visits and who was there, and inputting those. And then there's rules around the social aspect of things. So there is supposed to be some sort of health and fitness component, and how they define that is not a broad definition. So you can't just invite people to book club and count that as a swipe. So yes, there are definitely rules that we need to make sure that we are falling into with regard to Silver Sneaker swipes.
Yeah, we
Okay.
have approached the senior center, and they are certainly open to any creative thinking we can come up with. As Kim referred to, we could potentially have a satellite down there. We have to then make sure how that's going to work. So the other thing I'll mention is the existing contract. I tried recently to see what we could do to renegotiate pieces of that. I was told too late to the game. You have 120 days before your contract is renewed. It basically comes down to next summer would be the next time they would even entertain us going line by line through the contract and seeing if we could renegotiate. Maybe perhaps the timing might be good for that. I mean, I hate to think that COVID would still be lingering to that degree, but perhaps that's an option. We could try to renegotiate line by line with them and see what we come up with.
So who are we negotiating with? I mean, who has the authority to speak for this program? I don't mean the individual, but the organization.
Tivity is the third party that basically oversees the program, and
Who do they
lady
oversee
I
it
spoke-
for?
United, I guess they're contracted out by United Health, would be my understanding. Is that right, Kim? In terms of,
United
They
Health is Renew Active.
I'm sorry. Who am I thinking of? Through the state.
Optum.
The state retirement system, isn't it?
Yeah. No,
No, it's their insurance provider. It's Optum.
It's
It's health insurance.
United Health is both, though. United Health had the Silver Sneakers. Just one. They were our initial contract with this. I think has them on it. But they're a third party, so there is so there's someone beyond them. We can make sure we understand who that is, but I think it was United Health. But that's who we talked with. That's how, when they came, my understanding was when they came to us back in 2014, that's who, it wasn't Tivi, it was called somebody else at that point, but it was a third party manager. We've never been able to literally talk directly to anybody beyond them. They manage the program, they offer the contract, they sign the contracts. They have the authority to implement changes in the contract, so is my understanding.
They're charged with keeping the cost down for the insurer, which is why we haven't been able to talk to anyone besides them over the years.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
couldn't hear that, Ben.
It said that their job is to keep things cheap for the insurer, which is why we haven't been able to actually talk to the insurer and only talk to them.
That's
That's
fine.
I
why,
think
that's
they
why they
still-
hire a middleman.
I have still said for a long time, and I still think it's true, that we ought to talk to the comptroller's office, because they're the ones who negotiate this.
I think that's a very good idea. Is this something does CCM have any interest in this issue?
This is a negotiated healthcare system between the unions and the state. And I don't think that that they're going to listen to anybody outside of that circle.
Because I mean, in the sense of the towns are paying a lot of the cost of this. Jay, is there a Connecticut, Jay and Kim, is there a Connecticut-based association of park and rec directors?
Yeah, yes. We have an association that is pretty strong in the state.
Would they be interested in this issue? Talking to the comptroller as a group?
We can certainly approach them, the leadership, but we are, unique to having maybe not Silver Sneakers, but a Silver Sneaker membership to versus what I call Silver Sneaker Flex, which is just for classes at a senior center, for example. So that's the challenge, which is why sometimes I refer to the YMCA's only because they've collectively have some buying power, although even some of them now I know out in Middle Tennessee and down in Florida, they've dropped the program because they have not been able to negotiate what they feel is a fair. So anyhow, state of Connecticut, it's Richfield who doesn't have the program.
But
Ourselves, Newtown
But
opened up a
originally you
center.
said was not gonna have a program.
Right, I'm saying, I'm going through my mind.
Oh,
I don't believe there are people with memberships versus, again, just a silver sneaker classes. So they're always willing to support us, but I don't know, without it being a collective problem across most departments in the state, that they will get too involved, but we could certainly approach
Okay.
them.
well, I mean, it's, again, it's, you think, if it's potentially useful, sure. Any, anything else you two, you'd like to talk about, or any other questions?
I just wanted to
Well-
point out, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Jay. I just wanted to say, these conversations tend to focus heavily on the future of silver sneakers and these insurance supported memberships, which makes sense. But I know, and we probably don't want to unpack it all tonight, but I know Jay and I have talked quite a bit about areas of additional growth opportunity. And so Jay, I don't know if you want to, maybe not in a ton of words, but if you want to do a brief once over, recap some of the conversations we've had on that front.
Sure. I mean, keeping the eye on, serving all populations. And with that, whether Silver Sneakers stays or is modified or goes, is the need to continue to attract our full paying customers, but our families, groups, and our individuals, both in town and regionally. And so, not that we haven't done over the years, of course, we have done a lot of work in those areas, but saying, okay, let's refocus and also maybe expand some of those ideas, which may include some different types of fundraising initiatives, whether that's, looking towards, again, private individuals or businesses, capital campaigns, scholarship funds. We had a friends group with the Park and Rec department at one point that I wasn't directly involved with. I think it kind of came to a slow halt even before COVID. Could that be a partnership that we develop a 501c with? Other events, we've always done events, but can we expand that net of events that we do to draw people into the center that aren't maybe as familiar as we think? So maybe there's a community walkathon or a road to wellness kind of initiative, and that can also be a fundraising thing for the center or a local nonprofit or split. So those are some quick things. We've also even looked at, relooking at our membership tiers. I don't think any of us are prepared to say, hey, that's the perfect direction to go in, but I think we have to look at, we only have one membership option. That's one of the things with Silver Sneakers, and talking to them Tivia is, it's really, Silver Sneakers is really designed as your basic level of membership for the private health groups when it first came out many years ago, because a lot of private health clubs have tiered memberships. So right now, most WISE and community centers like ours have just one membership option. And so is there a way to do a tiered options of some type? So there are a lot of different things that we've talked about. Not sure I'll capture them all, Ryan. Maybe there's some things I left out.
I have a question. One of the areas that we haven't talked about at all is the Community School of the Arts. How has that been performing as a financial, as a financial wing?
Right. Well, so I'll talk to that in a couple of different ways. One is we do see that as an area of growth. As you probably recall, it opened November of 2019, and then COVID hit several months after that. So how we're doing right now is we're not losing money down there, but we're not anywhere near what we envisioned in our business plan had pre-COVID. So we're providing virtual and some limited in-person classes, but only running at a very minimal level with expenses in terms of staffing and such for the building. So we have been working with our new recreation coordinator Bethany Colonna on a, marketing promotional action plan, which, goes into a variety of different things for community school. But I almost feel like we're almost relaunching that facility in some ways because we had some good momentum coming out of UConn. Then we did things at E.O. Smith in our center. And then we went into Leonard Hall and the momentum was just continuing and building up, and then boom. And I almost feel in some ways, although we have some programs out there, we almost have to kind of re-promote the facility and time it with the
Yeah,
subsiding.
it's kind of you have to do every year. I mean, right.
So not much money being made, but we're making happy customers with the folks that are interested right now, and we are watching every expense we have to make sure we're not spending frivolously down there, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
Right.
I just wanted to mention, another area of potential revenue growth that Jay and I have been talking about is sort of in the, I guess, broadly speaking, the private fundraising area. But, there's always an interest in business sponsorships. But I think there's more potential, untapped potential, perhaps, for us to try to cultivate relationships with private donors and benefactors. And so, we don't necessarily have a 12-point plan or a 152-point plan ironed out on that front. But that is one area that I'd like for us to devote more attention to moving forward, because I think there's certainly a lot of emotional attachment that a lot of people have to the community center. And I think, given that, given the public facing nature of the community center, I'm optimistic that there would be, certainly a group of people with means that would be interested in supporting, whether it's, capital projects or actually, underwriting programs. And we talked about scholarship options, because obviously the council, it's very clear that council, one of your priorities collectively is making sure that we provide programs and services and meet the needs of people of all economic means. And that's why affordable housing is so important in this town. We want to make improvements and headway in that area. And so the same is true for us wanting to make sure that the community center, is not just a playground of people with certain, economic capabilities. And so, again, growth and hopefully untapped opportunities to find people that want to sponsor and underwrite programs for people that are, more on the economically disadvantaged spectrum is certainly something that we're looking at.
I just see, thank you, Ryan. Al just joined us, or I joined us a few minutes ago. Al was just at the very, presumably near the end of the silver sneaker discussion. But do you have questions or anything you'd like to ask Jay, Kim?
Well, I just want to say to Jay, congratulations, first of all, on your promotion. I wanted to make sure I said that. From what I see, and I am very sorry that I'm as late as I am, it seems like you've done a lot of work here. I don't really have time to formulate any questions, but I appreciate the work that you put in.
Well, thank you. That certainly includes Kim and our staff as well. That's helped to kind of work on this over the years. So want to recognize them and their efforts as well.
So
I will say, I know Peter had a question about, is there any other comments? I think, it's great that we have so many seniors that are interested in staying and fit. And, that's the great thing about, having a benefit like this. And because of, I think, the nature of our facility being a little different than maybe, a private, kind of, I don't want to name a gym, but a gym that maybe is not so community focused, we'll say, that's more about coming in, do your workout and leave, and sort of targeted more to a very, very maybe younger, buff crowd, if I can use those words. The community center because of one of its strengths is that people feel very comfortable here. We have the therapy pool, we have good access and parking. We have great staff, so they feel very comfortable here, coming here as an option. And I think that's why you see a 40% to 55%, number for folks that come in here versus maybe a more of a traditional gym down the road that maybe is seeing, 5 to 10%. So.
So, Peter, I don't have any questions, but I do just sort of have an opinion about how we ought to proceed. I know Jay's on our agenda for Monday to be sort of formally introduced as the permanent director and give an overview of the work that we've been doing on this committee, as well as everything else going on in Parks and Rec. And I think just from my perspective, yeah, I agree, I think mostly with what has been presented here. I don't think it's wise to make a big sweeping changes in the middle of COVID driving down attendance regardless of the paying model. And so as long as we're not in this place forever, or in a couple of years where we're still seeing people who aren't comfortable going back to the gym, as long as we bounce back soon, I think it makes sense to continue as we've been continuing. But I will say I also agree with B in the sense that we're currently in pre-pandemic. We were subsidizing state retirees by and large, people who have the Silver Sneakers program, by about $100,000 out of general fund money, not to mention whatever the portion of subsidy that comes out of the people who are dues paying members was for the memberships that aren't paying as much. And I don't think that's an economic model that is right for us. I do think we ought to be subsidizing Parks and Recreation using taxpayer dollars, including the community center. But I don't think it's right to issue a subsidy blanket to people who happen to have a certain health insurance provider, rather than expanding what we're doing. And so I've said this before, but I would be really supportive of taking a really big and holistic approach and look at everything that the Parks and Recreation Department does, everything we charge a fee for or a membership fee for right now, and looking at what are there things that we should stop charging residents for and offer as a community benefit rather than as a fee-based service. And then are there things that we can expand our ability to offer fee waivers for people who might need them, who meet an income threshold essentially. And so if we got rid of Silver Sneakers, I would be very supportive of expanding that fee waiver program for gym memberships. But I also think there's a lot at the community center that we could pull out of a fee-based structure. I think just the attitude, understandably, for a long time has been that the department needs to break even. And it's the only department in municipal government that we make that request of. No one's asking the Public Works Department to break even every year. And so I think we need to think of some of the things that they do as public benefits that are subsidized by the general, that are paid for by the general fund. And I think this conversation should happen within that larger and broader sort of reimagining of our parks and recreation offerings in town. And I think you have a plan for how to kind of address that specifically over time with us sort of coming out of COVID. So, I mean, all of which is to say, I think after all of this, the recommendation to the town council from this committee sounds like we got to get through COVID, which we thought we'd be through by now. And then the recommendation is, as long as the terms of the contract stay the same, and we can try to negotiate them, but I am more pessimistic about that proposition than Tony and Peter might be. That it doesn't make financial sense for us to continue with Silver Sneakers, but that we can switch to Renew Active and do these steps to try to bring Silver Sneakers members into our general membership.
I don't know. I mean, that may be the recommendation. I don't think, we don't have one yet on that. I certainly, and that may be, that may be what we ultimately support, what I ultimately agree with, makes a lot of sense in some ways. One thing I do feel strongly about, which is, I think, I guess what Val said, which is there's so many uncertainties with COVID, not simply now, but how this changes behavior in multiple ways. And I'm not, and I'm always skeptical of major changes in human behavior or, consumption behavior, but it happens sometimes. And I don't think, right, I agree, this is not the time right now, because I don't think we can, to make a significant change with silver sneakers, simply because we can make best guesses and have to proceed, which is what any government agency does. But I think it's very hard to do so in this area with COVID, because how it affects people's overall perception of gathering in groups to exercise or anything else. So I don't know if let's do this. I don't think we have a report. I don't think we have a recommendation yet for the town council. I think this is something let's talk about at the next meeting. And it may be, and I also agree that, and it may be simply that we need to wait a bit longer and see how things shake out, hopefully soon, post-COVID. The idea of the fact that there are philosophical or just, or public policy issues in how we treat silver sneakers within the context of parks and recreation as a whole, I agree. I don't think we're ready for a recommendation on that, and that may not be one the finance committee needs to actually make a recommendation on, because ultimately it's, that strikes me as a very good topic for the town council as a whole. But what I suggest is that we talk about what, if any, recommendation we want to make. We have to say something to the rest of us, because we've been working on this for a while. But I suggest we have that as an agenda item for the next meeting.
Well, Peter, I think we've done that, unless you've got more thinking to do. We've been,
well,
these
no,
are
but
the recommendations, and I think they're recommending that we continue through COVID. And then when we hit the end of it, we make a decision around continuing to accept renew active. But the way I read this document is that Jay's recommendation is that what's right here in front of us, that we discontinue silver sneakers at the point where we've got attendance back to normal, unless there's a significant renegotiation with Tivity that provides a more sustainable reimbursement rate. Am I incorrect? Is that not your recommendation, Jay? These aren't choices. This is 4 things that Jay's recommending that we do.
I would say, yes, that is a recommendation. I will, the only other twist I would throw in there, and perhaps finance committee is, respectfully isn't interested, but do we want to hire a financial consultant to work through membership program fees and see if they have some broader or more specific insight to how to solve this problem with us, as well as the greater challenge that we have, within, to try to maintain adequate recovery. So anyhow, that's the other thing it's underneath A there, but yes, I say that because, you hate to pull anything away from anyone that they've gotten used to, but you were asking for recommendations, and that's certainly right there on the screen, and as one. So
can I add something? And this is just my personal feeling. I like in the chat, Ryan added that there was going to be some strategic planning, hopefully over the next year, for the Parks and Rec as a whole. I am more and more concerned that keeping the community center as a separate entity all of the time really focuses on that particular problem at the cost of services to the community as a whole, because not everything happens in the community center. And I really am anticipating what the outcome of a strategic plan would be, because I would hope that, carrying Ben's idea, that there is an expanded attention to bringing families and younger adults into the community center, not just by swimming and exercising, but also by some of the other programs which Parks and Rec offers.
So, right.
So what I'm really saying is if there's going to be a strategic plan, maybe we should hold off on recommendations until there's a strategic plan.
The only thing about that, well, you know, whenever I hear the industry talk about a strategic plan, insurance industry in a white paper, it's because they don't want to do something for the next 5 years. That is not the case here. It just triggers that response. Government office is not a private sector company, but we have to, if we do that, we have to recognize that we're going to be continuing to likely a pretty significant subsidy. I mean, you know, we'll delay and we'll delay by a year or two how, you know, how we can deal with this, you know, more directly. That may be the best thing to do, but the longer we wait.
Peter, I would just add, I mean, yeah, certainly anything that's sort of, I guess, 30,000 foot level paradigm shifting, you know, fundamental policy shift for Parks and Rec, you know, that would, you know, in all likelihood, be sensible to delay any potential action on that, you know, pending the outcome of this this comprehensive planning process. But I guess I do want to just offer that I don't view, and I don't think Jay would view, the planning process as meaning other, whether you want to call them interventions, incremental changes, additions, subtractions, like those don't all go on a shelf and wait. I mean, we can still be doing these sort of series of kind of controlled experiments on trying to improve the situation while we're still doing the broader planning process. So I just didn't want you to get the impression that we're saying, well, let's kind of hold off on changing anything or adding or subtracting anything for a year while we're planning. So.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, I understand that. It's a good point.
Peter, from my perspective, I think the reality is that COVID is going to guarantee that we will continue to, regardless of the Silver Sneakers program, that COVID is going to guarantee that we will continue to subsidize a significant reduction in community center utilization for at least the next year. I mean, I might be wrong, but it seems like we've got a couple of years left of people, even if their feelings become less warranted, a significant number of people feeling uncomfortable going back into public and exercising shoulder to shoulder with other folks and stuff like that. So I would expect that subsidy is going to continue with or without a decision on this issue. And I think I agree with what staff is saying, that making changes amidst that is potentially even more disruptive. I think the other benefit to waiting a little bit is we get to see what happens with Wyndham and what they end up doing with their sort of membership model, including whether they accept Silver Sneakers, because that might have to play a little bit on our decision. If we've got a brand spanking new municipal facility down the street that is accepting Silver Sneakers, we might think again about canceling it. On the other hand, if they're not accepting Silver Sneakers because it doesn't make sense economically for them either, then I think it bolsters the case that it's less advantageous for us to have it. There's less competition for those members. Just looking at the list of existing Silver Sneakers providers, the others that are within reasonable driving distance of town are the sort of,
right,
very commercial gym environments that I think are really
yeah,
different.
especially when it was a Planet Fitness was one of them, or
Yeah, and the Eastbrook Mall Center
yeah,
is the other one.
that is very, very, I mean, who knows, unless they change their model, that is very different. All right, so do we, Al and Ben, we can make this recommendation to the town council? Or Tony, you're on mute?
I think Tony's talking to someone else.
Oh,
or
okay.
no, us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Peter, it's up. I guess I don't know that we I don't know that I feel like I need to make a motion and make
No,
an
I
official
don't-
recommendation from the finance committee. If you, I would be satisfied as a counselor if you came and sort of gave a report over what we've done and what we've sort of, what direction we think the council should go in. I can make a motion if you'd be more comfortable, but I also,
No, I think for this, it's probably better because the more general nature of it, I think I think what you first suggested, Ben, is a good idea. Al, do you have a preference either way or third way?
No, I really don't. I was really listening very intently, and I think that Ben has raised a lot of good points that I agree with. But the comfortableness of making a motion and making that all happen tonight, I can see the reason to hesitate on that. Because it is such a big topic. I mean, yeah, that's sort of my thinking.
All right, okay, Jay and, I don't know if Kim's still there, but in terms of the C and D, the C and D recommendations, do you need anything from us to continue doing this? Or to additional funds? Or do you need a timeline in terms of how you're thinking of, because no one can do everything at once?
Under, I'm sorry, Peter, under which
C and
one?
D, well, as you pointed out a few minutes ago, so you're in your memo, it's recommendations C and D don't, much of them can be done now, or at least before before COVID ends.
Yeah, I think,
Right.
Peter, a lot of the C and D stuff, these are sort of, largely anyway, sort of operations level things, and it's included here, not because it needs, finance committee or council, for that matter, level sort of sign off. It's just wanting to keep you guys informed of, things that we're looking to do.
Right, so I guess right, I understand that, it's a good point. So I guess out of that, two things. One, do you need to request additional funding to do any of this? And the second thing is, I mean, it'd be great to see like, which do you want to tackle, not tonight, but which do you want to tackle first? What's your timeline for these? Because they're excellent recommendations.
Yeah, so I don't anticipate any additional funding for the C and D areas that you're referencing. I think in terms of a priority, we probably need a little time to just, not much, but just kind of look at all the things that we have on the list and say, okay, what do we want to start with, and probably we'll start with multiple things, quite honestly, probably not just one. So I think that can happen in a relatively short amount of time.
Okay.
The only thing, I guess, whether there will be funding down the road is if there's an interest, in doing any kind of consultant work. And then I'll just remind us that on the last page, I think it's the last page, we have been trying to do what we can during COVID. There were some things that we identified as action steps we could take, and I don't want to recapture all those because I think I went through them last time and they're here for you. But we have gone ahead and done about 5 different goals. I know I'm floundering around here, but here they are: goals to increase revenue during COVID pandemic. So we are actively keeping our eye on and doing things right now. They are limited because of the situation, but we certainly have not stayed by and been idle.
Oh, no. Okay.
The past year and a half. So.
All right. I did have one other question.
Attention members and guests, the time is now 8 p.m.
That's a great way of saying we need to cut this meeting.
Yeah, Jay's internet over there turns off at 8:03.
All right. Okay. All right. So I think we know how we'll proceed on Monday.
I didn't set that up.
Okay.
I was not, I didn't call them and ask them to do that.
No, that's all right. I mean, I guess one thing, if there is gonna be a strategic, if you guys are gonna start a, strategic study, a strategic review later this year, then it might make sense not to hire a separate consultant for this, but to include that as part of what the company we use or you use for, assuming you're gonna use one for the strategic review. That I think would probably make more sense. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're not gonna, Jay and Kim, thank you very much. And again, congratulations, Jay.
All right. Well, you're very welcome and we're happy to be here. And thank you again for the congratulations and support.
Oh, no, it'll be a lot of fun to work with you. All right, thank you. And I guess the last item, well, no, there's two more. One is to go back, Al, since I hadn't been at the last finance committee meeting, there wasn't a quorum to approve the minutes. I will go back to that, and if you or Ben want to, assuming you agree, you want to make one of those motions?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, two,
Aye.
and I'll abstain. All right, any other business?
Nope.
Can't be, it's a special meeting.
Oh, it's on our agenda. Oh, that's true. All right, future agenda items, we're gonna stop on that right now. All right, so we adjourn once we get a motion at 8:04. Ben or Al, you want to move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
And we adjourn at 8:04. Thank you very much for your time and
Thank
patience,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Have a good evening all.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bye.